Hey there, folks. How's it going? Welcome to another episode of Rise Like Lions. I am Kevin.
And I'm Dave.
And it is good to be here with you today. And today we have a bit of a discussion of something. It's breaking news, but it touches on broader themes that we're seeing in our politics in North America. Our last episode, we looked at some hopeful politics, which is what's going on in Latin America. A little less hopeful here in North America. So I'm just going to talk about a couple articles, and then Dave and I will pull it apart and see what's going on here. So the first one I wanted to talk about, folks, is what happened recently in south of the border in the United States. Shout out to our American listeners. Hope you're doing well here today. And I'm sure if you're progressive, you're really feeling it, because what's going on in the States is unfortunately really a demonstration of what happens when politics becomes corrupted, right? In the sense that you have certain individuals who are in political office who are so clearly and obviously beholden to special interests that there's not even any pretense that they are actually trying to legislate for the benefit of, in this case, in the case of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, trying to legislate on behalf of even their own citizens in their own states, right? And, particularly Manchin, who is the senator from West Virginia, it has clearly been, I like this article here. It just kind of pulls no punches. It just says bullshit. And what's really interesting, and this is sort of calling out Manchin for what he just did. So Manchin kind of went public and said what everyone knew he was going to do, which is that I can't support the Build Back Better bill, which, of course, is supposed to be the cornerstone of the Biden agenda. It has all of these really important provisions in it, extending child tax credits, extending all kinds of supports to poor and working class people in the United States that need them. And all along, Manchin and Sinema have been playing this game of will they, won't they, this sort of disingenuous back and forth. And it is, as in this case, Representative Ilhan Omar calls it, bullshit. They never had any intention of supporting the Build Back Better plan. And the reason is because in the case of Joe Manchin is, a coal baron, right? So his family is invested in coal. He has tight ties with the industry in West Virginia. So he opposes any kind of funding for climate change. And of course, the Build Back Better bill, being contributed to by some people who are not completely insane. They think climate change is a real thing, that maybe there needs to be some changes to the government, to infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. So they have that in the Build Back Better bill. It's one of the good provisions of it. And yet Manchin, he can't stomach that, so he's going to vote against it. And of course, this is after the bill has already been whittled down by these two. For Sinema, it's more big pharma. She seems to be channeling a lot of their interests, and she's channeling the interests for every dollar that flows into her campaign coffers. And there has been hundreds of thousands of dollars flowing into her campaign coffers from the pharmaceutical industry. So again, originally Build Back Better had provisions to expand Medicare for all, to lower the age of access to Medicare for all of these things that Senator Sanders and the the Justice Democrats
to do what we don't even do, get your teeth done, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Things that we would love to see in Canada with our public health care system. So, again, folks, we're partly preaching to the choir here. I mean, are our governments corrupt? Yes, they are.
Unless you're hate watching, and welcome.
Yeah, exactly. Then nice to have you aboard too. But, what's going on right now in the States is just such a crystal clear example of how corporate interests directly corrupts, like literally is paralyzing the entire agenda of a government, and a government that has both houses, presidency in both houses. The Democrats should be able to get things done, and they can't.
Well, this is part of that learning about the coalitions and getting the blinders off about liberal so-called types, because, man, we saw that with Obama already.
Yeah.
When they had everything going on, they tied their own hands and blinded one eye. And then it's like, oops, too late. Come the midterms and sweep on through. They claiming that the sweep on through was, progressives were bugging to get things done and people snapped back. No, what they did is said, What's the difference?
Yeah.
What's the friggin' difference?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Like a midterm massacre. That's what this is all sort of leading up to.
It's probably going to.
So, before, and again, I don't want this to be a thoroughly depressing segment, because let's just look at the problem first. And this is just such a classic example, such a compelling, obvious example of the problem, which is when you have money influencing your electoral system in this naked fashion, then they can torpedo the people's agenda.
But Ms. Pelosi says it's wonderful and says it should be. She goes like this and says, hey, we're capitalists.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. But so I want to look at an example happening in Canada too, which is a different version of the same problem, but it has an interesting twist to it, right? So right now in Canada, we have a situation where we have a real national reckoning taking place around our resource industries. And so what I mean by that is in Canada, we have mining, we have forestry, we have a fossil fuel industry, predominantly based in Alberta and the tar sands, but also we have pipelines going through British Columbia, through Saskatchewan, through Ontario. Like, we got pipelines flowing all over the place in our country. And there are huge conflicts about the need to transition away from this destructive, extractive industry towards more sustainable industry. So this is a battle being fought real time in Canada, and obviously in the United States too, around the world to a certain extent. Yeah. But what's really interesting about British Columbia is right now in British Columbia, we have a supposedly left progressive government in power right now in BC, which is the New Democratic Party, the NDP. And what the NDP has been presiding over is really depressing. It's sad to see. They have basically been taking the side of pipeline construction over the committed opposition of Native groups, where these pipelines are flowing through their territory. The Wet'suwet'en people is one of the big examples, with the coastal GasLink pipeline that they're totally opposed to. And also in British Columbia, not just the fossil fuel industry that is being fought, but also the extractive industries, in particular forestry. So you have as well, we've done an episode before on Fairy Creek. You have 3% of BC's old growth forests still remaining. And you have logging companies quite content to chop down all of that remaining. And in fact, it's all on the block to be fully logged. And so you have a government right now in British Columbia that is supposedly a left-leaning government, and they are basically supporting the RCMP to go in and bust heads of Native protesters, of young environmental activists. And again, why are they doing this? So here's the tie. You might say, well, what's the tie to Manchin and Sinema? Well, the tie is it's a little bit different, but unfortunately the end result is the same, is that there are powerful lobbies that are influencing the BC government, from labor unions, that are representing loggers, that are representing oil industry workers. And these voices, these interests in labor are on this situation. And this is weird. I am, full disclosure, I am an executive member of a union. I am a labor activist myself. I fully believe that, unions are important. Working people's interests are important. But these people are dead wrong if they think that the answer is just to keep on chopping down the old growth forest, to keep pumping the oil, to keep digging up the tar sands. It just totally isn't. So, they've got to shift to some sort of a just transition model, but they're not right now. And so you have this weird situation where you have a left-leaning government in power, which is pushing forward this destructive extractive industry. And it is in its own way the same kind of corruption that you're seeing south of the border that's torpedoing the Build Back Better bill, right? So again, if government becomes captive to a vested interest, in BC, it's the extractive industries south of the border. I mean, it's partly extractive industry in the case of Manchin, but it's also just big corporations in the sense of Kyrsten Sinema. In each of these cases, you get fatal distortions in how your democratic system works. You get horrible decisions made, and I think Dave, the big thing here, and this is what I want us to sort of think about a little bit, is what does this do when you in the States you elected Democrats and you supposedly you beat back the threat of Trump,
Right.
and you supposedly are now going to do these things that people need, and you can't do any of it. What does that do? What does that do to people, right?
It does is it continues to get you record low voting turnout. It continues to have people not bothering to get active on smaller levels within communities or activism, things like that, because they say, well, why?
What's the point?
Why?
Right?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Why? It's, it gets them lost in stories rather than getting realistic, which I can't blame them for. God, we all want to escape,
Yeah.
So many things. While, of course, those who are corporate minded, those who are right wing, have been used to being much more continuously vigilant and militant, and will organize themselves. I mean, they organize everything, if it kills them, literally, they will organize like not so. You could never actually rest back, but you will. Because, you get tired of it. Now, it shouldn't have been surprising. Everybody should have done it eyes open. I agree. I would have voted Biden. Well, I actually would have voted, of course, as you would, Sanders, to begin with, so that he wouldn't have got to there.
That was plan A.
But he gets to there, and that's because, the media doesn't cover him at all, no matter how popular, and all the youth voices mean nothing to them. Okay, fine. So it's going to be someone like Biden will make sure you don't get Trump again, because Clinton basically handed it to him. She was arrogant as could be,
Yeah.
But the fact is, he was called the senator from MBNA for a reason. I mean, it's true that he's not one of the more corrupt ones. So he's not like Manchin and a lot of the others where he's gotten wealthy, and Pelosi and stuff like that, where he's wealthy while in office. He's not even wealthy now. He really is by most standards. Nonetheless, he's hardcore right wing. He just is.
Yeah, he's certainly a corporate Democrat, right?
So so what he believes is, yes, ideally, I would like to see you all have this thing. I would like to do that. I'd like to whatever. But not if my relations are strained at all with a corporation, with a right winger, with a very classic, like, picture book image of a West Virginia, coal baron or anything else. I mean...
Yeah,
that will take precedent.
It will, and I think
same with all of them.
One of the issues too is that it sets up a Trump 2024 landslide, right? And this is the threat. I'm not saying that's 100% a given, folks,
but there's some blinders on about it already because of it.
Yeah,
there's some who are going, relax. He doesn't like to lose and everything. We just had January 6th go on and things like that because the man won't just accept a loss anyway.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to worry about it.
And I think the issue, the bigger issue is just pushing people towards that, right? Like it pushes people.
Or at least not giving them any incentive away.
Yeah, for sure. And so folks, in both cases, this is a failed game, a failed strategy. It simply cannot work. You can't get a party elected that supposedly has a progressive platform that is unable to do any of the things it needs to do because of the influence of vested interest. So two different scenarios. What can we do? Because again, this isn't a message of like, we throw our hands up and that's just too bad. It's corrupt. Obviously it's corrupt. We know this. But in the States, I think what's really positive is if you looked at what happened with the Justice Democrats, if you look at the Sanders movement, if you look at the run he took twice, right, to try and get into that position that he should be in today, as president of the United States.
Or at least have been the one to run for the Democrats, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think he should be president of the United States. I think what they need is what he was going to bring, right? Which is social democracy. Crazy, right? But anyway, what the rest
he's
of the
like
world
Lula.
is already.
Really.
He literally would be like an American Lula, right?
Yeah.
But what they have done, folks, even though right now, the unfortunate thing is they're shy 2 seats in the States. That's really what it's come down to. They're shy 2 seats. If they could have had 2 more, even moderately progressive Democrats in the Senate, then this agenda would pass. The Build Back Better bill would have passed in its original form, which would have been really significant, which would have really shifted things in the States, which would have put them on that sort of FDR track, where all of a sudden you're winning election after election after election for a decade or so because you've actually delivered for working class people. So they're close in the States, right? And that's I think, I don't want this to sound Pollyanna because things are really bad right now.
Yeah.
But the antidote, I think, is pretty damn clear. Wash, rinse, repeat. Keep doing what you were doing in terms of organizing to take down those corporate Democrats. Take them down next election. They have to be. You need to get a slight majority of progressives, right, basically, to get these things passed. And I think that there's a model out there, Dave. Like, I think we've seen with the slow expansion of the squad, we've seen, and you know, we can be critical, I think justly so, of maybe they haven't done enough, maybe they haven't been strong enough. But I think we're also deluding ourselves to think that their presence isn't significant.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. You know, you think this is a show, people? This is actually so I'm not hanging myself. That's what he's for, you know, because you just brought me back around to it again. And I remember, okay, yeah, you know, it's true that that his former boss, Obama, you know, he conceded too much. He didn't do that, but they did still get 20 million more people getting some health care and stuff.
Yeah.
Some stuff improved.
Yeah.
And same goes with under Biden. He gave a thumbs up to a union effort. My God, the most progressive president in my lifetime has not done that once.
Yeah.
They don't see it. It's like, what? Huh? Union? You know? And as you say, there's been other things, like he's been respectful reasonably to someone like AOC and stuff like, and to Tlaib and the others. You're right. It's rinse and repeat, even with all the failings.
Yeah.
And which is actually what they did keep doing in Chile and Bolivia and all those places. Yes. Venezuela keeps saying, yeah, we know, we're awful, we're everything too bad. We're still going to keep doing it.
Yeah, 100%, Dave. And I think that's kind of it. And so, you know, that's, and I think the folks in the States, like, you know, whether it's the Justice Democrats, whether it's, you know, the community coming together around Democratic Socialists of America, Jacobin, all these groups, like,
right.
I think they understand this and they're working on this, and it's exciting, and they need to keep pushing, right? And in Canada, our situation is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more challenging, maybe in ways, because you know, we do have a party that in a lot of ways is still a social democratic party, which is the NDP. We also have another party which brings interesting things to the table, which are the Greens, you know, and some of their stuff is spot on.
Technically, right? They have them too, but ours actually have something.
Yeah, exactly. They're really green. Our Greens, for whatever criticisms, they're really green. Like they're super solid on the environment.
And they've had seats and whatever, you know. Like,
exactly. They've crossed that threshold, right? They've gotten it done a few times. Yeah. But one of the real challenges, I think, and especially, and I have to be honest, that I am someone who electorally tends to support the NDP, but I have criticisms, I have reservations. And one of my big ones is about what's going on in BC is, again, falling into this trap. We've talked about it before on the podcast, falling into this false dichotomy between you can have an economy or you can have an environment. It's so tired. It's so played out. It's so not true anymore. We need to get the hell over that. And unions need to get the hell over that. They need to understand that, yeah, if you're a union and you represent loggers, I get it. You want to represent their interests. Guess what? Chopping down all the forests, where does that get you? It doesn't get you jobs. It doesn't get you a sustainable industry. And it gets you a completely FUBAR environment. It gets you unchecked climate change. It's insane. So why aren't the unions lining up behind just transition? Why aren't the unions coming forward and saying, wait a second, folks, we get it. Leave the old growth alone. Leave it alone, right? You log other things, that's great. You do it sustainably, that's great. No one's saying we can never cut down another tree. It's just not feasible. But there are things to be done, right? And same thing with the oil industry, right? Like, we know we've got to transition away from that. Why aren't the unions leading the charge to make sure that their members are going to have a future, that they're going to be looked after in that transition? That's what I'd like to see, Dave.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to see that too. And what that comes from is, embrace it and embrace it all the way.
Yeah.
The way we got our assumptions to begin with in the Western world that had led to conservative dominance and all that was that they had the assumptions and they pushed them and they continued with them and they made it so.
Yes.
Time to do that now.
I agree.
Carry that assumption. Hell, I don't even argue about climate change. Screw that. It's messy, it's ugly, it stinks, it's just awful. We need to go to, if something can be nicer, cleaner, and better and still employ people, it's better.
Definitely. And so,
Period.
And so, the last point I want to end on, which is a hopeful point, which is that, I think there are signs that this is happening, right? So recently you had a group of NDP members of parliament, federal NDP members of parliament. And one of the folks, and I got to give a shout out to, is Matthew Green, who's leading this charge. And
Local
I have to
guy.
give a shout out exactly because he is in the riding I actually live in, which is downtown Hamilton, and Dave too. He is our federal representative. I think he does a damn good job.
Coincidence?
Yeah. No, you know what? It's
not entirely.
This is total nepotism,
mostly.
But it's okay.
Yeah.
He's actually not a dick. He's a really good guy, and on a lot of issues. But what's really cool is, it's these NDP MPs having the courage to call out another NDP party. And this is one of those things that we're just going to have to do. And it's funny, I was on a call earlier today, Dave, with a guy who's a longtime NDPer, hardcore, a lot of blood he's poured into that party, right? And he's even said he likes to see this initiative.
Good.
So what these MPs have done, folks, is they put forward a letter, a public letter, and Abby Lewis is one of the signatories too, right?
There's a name that goes back.
Yeah, in Canada, right? The Lewis family, really, really important family in terms of social democracy in Canada.
Yeah.
And so they're calling on the BC government to basically stop supporting the crackdown on Native protesters that are trying to protect their land, on environmental protesters who are trying to basically get us to embrace sanity when it comes to climate change. This is really exciting, folks. We need to get on board. And as someone who, again, if there are other listeners who are supporters of the NDP, please consider, sending something, sharing the letter. I'm gonna get on and sign up myself. To be real, I haven't done it yet, but it's gonna happen later today, because so there's two things we need to do, right? We need to keep electing progressives, but also we need to put pressure on the people when they get in office that they damn well better do what they said they were going to do, right?
Right.
They've got to bring the change that they promised.
Or at least be honorable. Okay, maybe they have some argument for that. Try your words or something else. But supporting RCMP, who are basically treating them, well, actually, like they've always treated the Indigenous in this country, haven't they?
Yeah.
From their beginning.
They're being sadly consistent.
They do not have the American Hollywood image at all.
No, not a bit. But again, this is the task before us, folks. If we want to have, as Dave says, if we want to have nice things, if we want to have social democracy, if we want to, or democratic, I'd say democratic socialism. That's full disclosure.
Yes.
If we want to have healthcare for all, if we want to have, guaranteed income, if we want to have reasonable minimum wages and paid sick days and all of these things that
everybody can live, have basic respect, decency, and air to breathe just by virtue of being born. What's wrong with that?
100%.
That was natural for a million years. Why not bring it back?
Yeah, exactly. And Dave, I think we both know you can build a coalition around that. You can build an 80% coalition around that.
You can drag a lot of people who think they're conservatives with that too.
Yeah, 100%. And so, folks, that's the task in front of us, right? We got to get the corruption out of our political system. The only way we do that is through organizing, through building coalitions, and through, eventually we got to win some elections too.
We do.
So, kudos to Latin America for showing us how it's done, because it can be done, Yeah. And so, again, folks, want to leave on that somewhat hopeful note after talking about political corruption. try to rescue this a little bit. But as always, if you like what you heard, please feel free to subscribe to the channel, to give us a like. If you even want, share the video to some friends, and that would be just great. But thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Take care.